Yep. Okay. Hello and welcome to State of Play on Mint Press News, where we break down and address all the insanity that happened over the weekend. If you haven't been living under a rock for the past 2 years, that has absolutely been the trend. It is Monday evening, East Coast time, February 3rd. I'm your host, Greg Stoker, a U.S. military veteran turned anti-imperialist activist and geopolitical commentator analyst, and this is our editorial news show. And just like on my own podcast, Colonial Outcast, both super shadow banned, by the way. So if you would engage with these videos on the platform in order to push them further on the algorithm, it would make you even more awesome than you already are. So I voice an opinion which is vindicated more and more every day that the United States empire, like all other empires, is in a state of irrevocable decline. Like the British Empire before us, it is doomed to death. It doesn't matter how robust a movement of national rejuvenation is, MAGA isn't going to cut it. The empire is done. The salient question is, I mean, it still has a lot of inertia behind it, which we'll talk about later in the episode, with tariffs being levied for better border deals. So, the U.S. is still a massive beast, but it's done as an empire eventually. So the salient question is then, will the United States survive as a polity? That is not looking good. And in the meantime, hundreds of thousands, probably millions, will die. We'll get into this later in the episode, but we are currently witnessing a soft, so far bloodless coup. So that's fun. Plant trees, protect the bees, and punch Nazis. Anyways, it's an age-old public relations ploy to initiate controversial Fridays. People are tuning out for the weekend. The blowback will be limited, and the 24-hour news cycle will turn over a couple of times before Monday, and the story will be somewhat buried in time for a new catastrophe to dominate the headlines. That's the classic age-old PR strategy. And tonight on State of Play, we examine the controversial policy move the Trump administration, through strong arming of unelected immigrant sorry, let me break down all the adjectives I'm using in this one. Through the strong arm policies of unelected immigrant billionaire who worked here illegally on a J-1 visa, Elon Musk, is in the process of shutting down the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, escalating their war on the federal bureaucracy and defying the constitutional power of Congress to determine how money is spent. Musk, the head of Trump's government efficiency initiative, announced the shutdown in the middle of the night in an audio-only appearance on his social media site, X. We're shutting it down, he said. At another point, he said, we're in the process of shutting down USAID. And Musk did not say what legal authority he believed the White House has to shut down a federal agency without congressional approval, or how quickly the administration planned to act on this. He said the idea had the, quote, full support of the president. We've since seen videos of Donald Trump saying it's a terrible agency, we're giving all this money. He also says we're going to sanction the EU now, and that he has spoken with Trump on the matter several times. So, yeah, I just wanted to point out that the Democrats in the Senate, in the Congress, are doing absolutely nothing. We're going to talk more about that later, but I wonder what that is. I wonder if it has to do historically that liberals just end up towing the line with everybody else when these kind of things happen. So here's the current situation. We're going to look at a very vanilla Al Jazeera primer. It's acceptable despite being the state media of Qatar, a comprador government to Western imperialism. Then we're going to get into the weeds. So here's a pretty good primer.
Has long helped the US achieve its foreign policy goals. President Donald Trump's decision to freeze almost all foreign assistance for 90 days as part of his America First strategy has upended decades of policy and is already having a global impact. In 2023, Washington distributed $72 billion of funding in nearly 180 countries. 4 days after taking office, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio sent a cable to embassies worldwide ordering a halt to US projects supporting everything from access to clean water, healthcare, education, and children's health. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, helps combat the spread of HIV and AIDS and is just one of the programs impacted by the freeze.
Certainly, people living with HIV should still be able to access treatment through government facilities. But the government facilities are going to come under more pressure because you're removing a whole number of staff that were otherwise being funded by the grants.
Initially, the only exemptions to the freeze were US military aid to Israel and Egypt. And
Okay, yeah, so there are going to be more exemptions. Actually, we're just people are just trying to figure out what the exemptions are. The language is murky. Kind of reminds me of trying to get, U.S. adjacent forces and their families out of Afghanistan as Kabul was falling to the Taliban. So it's kind of will be mired in bureaucracy. One of the reasons, obviously, we're going to support Israel no matter what. But the reason aid is going to Egypt is because Egypt has a lot of problems domestically and economically, and we cannot risk, as an imperial power, any disruption to the Suez Canal. That would be devastating. So what's up, Amanda Seals? So great to have you here. And thank you all so much for coming. Real quick, never mind. Look, Suez Canal, Israel. That's why these are the main exemptions right now. But there will be more.
And the emergency food programs, like the one used to help the people suffering from a widening famine in Sudan. The US system for monitoring global famine has been taken offline. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio signed an additional waiver exempting life-saving humanitarian assistance from the freeze, leaving humanitarian organizations seeking clarity on what qualifies as life-saving assistance. But the waiver does not apply to abortions, family planning, and programs that do not align with Trump's conservative policies.
And right now, I just have to point out that when Trump said $50 million in condoms to Gaza, it was a province in Mozambique. A former U.S. project as well. So, anyways, just some little trivia for the insanity that's going on currently.
Humanitarian assistance programs in Ukraine have been forced to cut services and stop many social projects, including the Veteran Hub that supports soldiers and their families.
We have not been able to pay salaries or any expenses since January. This means we are not allowed to ask people to work.
The United Nations Secretary General has called for additional exemptions to be issued, but the picture remains unclear and it has endangered the lives of millions of people globally. But some recipients of aid say the freeze is an opportunity for them to work towards self-reliance.
What are we going to do? To support ourselves. Because nobody is going to continue holding out a hand there to give you. It is time for us to use our resources for the right things. We are the ones who are using them for the wrong things.
For now, the full fallout of the Trump administration's decision has yet to become clear. Humanitarian aid agencies are scrambling for clarification while doing what they can to keep providing essential care for people and communities most in need.
All right, so to define our most basic terms here, the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, is an independent agency of the United States government. It's not. That is primarily responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance. With a budget of $50 billion, they spend more than this. USAID is one of the largest official aid agencies in the world and accounts for more than half of all U.S. foreign assistance, the highest in the world in absolute dollar terms. So this has been around for a while. Congress passed the Foreign Assistance Act in 1961, which reorganized U.S. foreign assistance programs and mandated the creation of an agency to administer economic aid. USAID was subsequently established by the executive order of JFK, who sought to unite several existing foreign assistance organizations and programs under one agency. So how it kind of works is Congress authorizes USAID's programs. So it's inextricably linked from Congress. So it was established by an executive order, but him just sending Elon Musk, an unelected official, who's basically just a presidential advisor to kind of undercut Congress is wild to watch. So Congress authorizes USAID's programs in the foreign affairs, and we can do B-roll. Come on. As an official component of U.S. foreign policy, USAID and Funding Appropriations Act and other legislation. As an official component of U.S. foreign policy, USAID operates subject to the guidance of the President, Secretary of State, and the National Security Council. USAID has missions in over 100 countries, primarily Africa, Asia, Latin America, the global South. Okay, so and sometimes Eastern Europe, definitely Europe during the Cold War. So that's what is on paper for USAID. That's the literal Wikipedia definition that doesn't get changed and is allowed to stay there. But that's only like 20% of the picture, right? If you think the American empire does anything altruistically, you haven't been paying attention to 16 months of genocide in Palestine. So Elon Musk's penetration of sensitive government systems by his 19 to 24-year-old bro acolytes is reaching alarming levels. On Saturday night, some Doge official, I don't know how you pronounce this acronym, I suppose in the douchiest way possible. So I think personally for me, that's Doge, like Dogecoin. So on Saturday night, some Doge officials showed up at the USAID offices demanding access, and they were blocked by two security officials who have now been put on leave for doing their job. It's going to be a common theme over the next, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years. They were trying to gain access to classified information. So a lot of media reporting on USAID, like the Al Jazeera primer that we just watched, characterizes it as a foreign aid organization, which is obviously true. They do a bunch of great stuff in Africa with predictive famine monitoring, HIV treatments, etc. But it's only it's only kind of like not necessarily a front, but it's only part of what they really do. USAID is actually an instrument of United States soft power. So in politics, we need to define that term for us, I believe. So in politics, and particularly international politics, soft power is the ability to co-opt rather than coerce, in contrast with hard power. Hard power is like military intervention, economic sanctions. We're going to force you by guns or by money to do what we want you to do. So co-opting is get other people to do it voluntarily, to try to aspire to be you, do things like you, co-opt rather than to coerce. It involves shaping preferences through appeal and attraction. So again, soft power is non-coercive, using culture, political values, and foreign policies to enact change. In 2012, Joseph Nye of Harvard University explained that with soft power, the best propaganda is not propaganda. Actually, uphold Western values, which now we know. Well, we know now. Further explaining that during the information age, he said, quote, credibility is the scarcest resource, unquote. So in his book, Joseph Nye wrote, and he's the one who kind of pioneered this term that we all use now in political science. When one country gets other countries to want what it wants, might be called co-optive or soft power, in contrast with the hard or command power of ordering others to do what it wants. So the Trump administration is now all hard power. Biden was mostly that, but we've seen it's been a crazy couple weeks. So categorically, after 16 months of unconditionally supporting the almost universally unpopular genocide in Gaza, giving lie to the idea of Western values and the rule of law, for instance, the U.S. has assailed the International Criminal Court and ICJ and every other international legal organization that has dared criticize its complicity with Israel. It has lost soft power. We talk about human rights when we have 4.4% of the world's population, but 1/5 of the world's prisoners. Or is it 1/5 or 1/4? Is it 20% or 25%? One of those, but it's higher than China. That's for sure. which everyone with half a brain knows is largely a neo-Jim Crow money-making scheme. And we are now deporting publicly and violently, separating families of undocumented peoples who fled to the United States because, among other reasons, the CIA overthrew their democratic governments in the purported interest of fighting communism in Latin America. And now we are cutting foreign aid. And not just that. It used to be that the CIA did this soft power stuff in Europe and the rest of the world during the Cold War, which was a hot war for many people around the world, which is why how many regime change and proxy wars do we fight? That's why I don't like the term Cold War. It's very Western centric. But anyways, because it was a hot war. They got busted in the 1970s by what was called the Church Committee, which also uncovered operations like MK Ultra and COINTELPRO. So that modus operandi of foreign aid to impact soft power was shifted to USAID. So it is fundamentally a tool of soft power, but it's also a central component of our national security apparatus and intelligence community. It means there's a lot of sensitive information inside its operation. As much as I hate three-letter agencies, for Elon Musk and his prepubescent techno bro acolytes, all unelected officials with zero experience with these things, to include not having security clearances, to having unfettered access as a declaration of war and further evidence of a soft coup against the federal government. Democrats haven't done anything and are kind of finished as a party with no oppositional resistance. Our institutions are forfeit. So that's kind of the basis of that. So yeah, someone said the Pike Committee in the House too. Yeah. Just taking a break real quick. Why do Americans not know Indonesia exists? Most people think Africa is a country. Maybe it's connected to the same issues. So what, at any rate, what USAID also allows the US government to do is leverage foreign aid to governments in order to get them to comply with US foreign policy and corporate objectives. Example, this is a non-specific example. Hello, small African country whose democratically elected government we overthrew in the 70s. And so you didn't get in with the USSR. Also, we want your minerals. You're having an HIV problem. You're having a food scarcity problem. Would you like medication to maintain and feed your population and not descend into chaos? Good. Well, here's the USAID. Let's talk about mineral rights and the placement of military bases in the region. Very reductive, but for those of you who are new to the concept of how US foreign aid works, some people in the government actually are altruistic, doing what we would call in the South the Lord's work, but it is an arm of the state. It is. You can call it an independent agency all you want. It's not. In the end, while USAID does help millions of people, most of whom wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for Western imperialism in the first place, but putting that aside, it is also a tool of empire. Yesterday, Musk tweeted that I don't have the actual tweet here, but there he is about to stick in the B-roll footage. Is he about to stick the salute, the Roman salute? Anyways, he said that, quote, USAID was a viper's nest of, quote, radical left Marxists who hate America. Dude. Okay, whatever. If your followers knew what Marxism was, simply a political theory and a method of socioeconomic analysis, they'd know that no true Marxist would ever work for USAID, but whatever. Not going into a tangent on that. The journalist Dan Cohen noted that, quote, Musk was demanding regime change in Venezuela last summer, which would have put a bunch of USAID-funded tools into power. Now that the Trump administration is negotiating with the real Venezuelan government, Musk wants to shut down USAID. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So this is kind of an interesting thing. So how USAID would work was like after a regime change or a U.S. friendly government was installed in a place, USAID would come in, do medical assistance, help with medical infrastructure, do food deliveries, basically all the humanitarian aid you can want to prop up this new government so there was no like counter revolution or anything like that. So if Maduro did get ousted over the elections last year, then USAID would come in. But since he didn't, now the Trump administration is actually having to engage in diplomacy with Maduro's left-wing government. And now Elon Musk wants to gut USAID. It's just typical, like really confused Trump administration foreign policy. It like everything they do is kind of like the hammer, right? So usually when all soft power is gone, regimes like this double down on force. But despite all the bluster of the Trump administration, they can only do so much in terms of foreign policy. You know, he can't stop the war in Ukraine or sanction China into the dust, overthrow the Iranian government. But this is what he has done. Perhaps what like Elon Musk has done, and now he's tacitly agreeing to. So Trump has ordered a global freeze on most U.S. foreign aid as part of his, quote, America First policy, which is already sending shockwaves around the world, like field hospitals and Thai refugee camps, landmine clearance in war zones, drugs to treat millions suffering from diseases such as HIV are among the millions suffering, are among the dozens and dozens and dozens of programs at risk of elimination. Again, there is a 90-day freeze on the organization as a whole, so none of this is happening right now, and I'm not sure if it will survive. So if you are an imperialist, you have lost a tool, leveraging foreign aid now and increasing the soft power of your associated government. Now, China has the ability to step into the role as the leader in global aid, increasing their soft power at the expense of ours. To any national security hawk, this should be concerning to you. However, as 3 hours ago, oh my God, I just have to take a break for a second. Think so insane. Moving on. However, as of 3 hours ago, in typical chaos fashion of the Trump administration, they're actually way more organized than last time, being full of loyalists above all else. But still, you have Musk saying that USAID must die. Then you have Marco Rubio, the war hawk Secretary of State, neocon war hawk Secretary of State, saying that he is in fact the acting head of USAID, which Musk froze and wants to destroy. So Musk, the president's like, I don't know, seneschal and or Chamberlain, and then you have the Secretary of State like saying two conflicting things. Again, Musk froze it. Apparently Marco Rubio is in charge of it. Trying to parse what's going on behind the scenes is really frustrating and not fun. Anyways, welcome to Trump 2.0. Here's Rubio, though, who is traveling to Panama to basically draw Panama on the Panama Canal outside of Chinese influence and to get them to sever ties with China's global infrastructure plan, the Belt and Road Initiative, which as of like 10 minutes ago seems to have happened. But anyways, let's look at this video of Marco Rubio real quick. I think I have it pulled up somewhere. Oh, here we go.
Yourself.
Oh, sorry. I accidentally spliced in a TurboTax commercial. Wonder if that was a complete accident or not. It's tax season, y'all. So, get ready to fund USAID if it still exists in furtherance of U.S. foreign policy objectives.
Are you currently in charge of USAID, or are you
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region. That cannot continue. USAID is not an independent, non-governmental entity. It is an entity that spends taxpayer dollars, and it needs to spend it, as the statute says, in alignment with the policy directives that they get from the Secretary of State, the National Security Council, and the President. And it's been 20 or 30 years where people have tried to reform it, and it refuses to reform. It refuses to cooperate. When we were in Congress, we couldn't even get answers to basic questions about programs. That will not continue. That's not going to continue. I mean, my frustration with USAID goes back to my time in Congress. It's a completely unresponsive agency. It's supposed to respond to policy directives of the State Department, and it refuses to do so. So the functions of USAID, there are a lot of functions of USAID that are going to continue, that are going to be part of American foreign policy, but it has to be aligned with American foreign policy. I said very clearly during my confirmation hearing that every dollar we spend and every program we fund, that will be aligned with the national interest of the United States. And USAID has a history of sort of ignoring that and deciding that there's somehow a global charity separate from the national interest. These are taxpayer dollars. And so I'm very troubled by these reports that they've been unwilling to cooperate with people who are asking simple questions about what does this program do, who gets the money, who are our contractors, who's funded. And that sort of level of insubordination makes it impossible to conduct the sort of mature and serious review that I think foreign aid writ large should have. We're spending taxpayer money here. These are not donor dollars. These are taxpayer dollars. And we owe the American people the assurances that every dollar we are spending abroad is being spent on something that furthers our national interest. And so far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
Refused to cooperate. So I think there's a lot going on here. First of all, I don't think USAID is going away. I don't think this is just a prediction. I could be wrong, because why would Marco Rubio be saying he's the acting head while Elon Musk is like gutting the entire agency? What I think is more likely is that Elon Musk is going to wreak havoc with his like 24-year-old tech bro acolytes, cut a bunch of jobs, scare a bunch of people, get everybody back in line, ensure that there are only loyalists in USAID, break the influence of the CIA inside it, I guess, and then keep it. When he says it's no longer serving U.S. foreign policy objectives, I feel like a soulless dude like Marco Rubio is saying, like, they're actually doing good things for the planet that, just Jesus would do. But if they're not serving U.S. foreign policy objectives, which are inherently imperialistic in nature, predicated on global domination and other stuff, that which you are very well acquainted with, in the end, it's all about getting this organization back in line. I don't think it's going to go away at all. So I downloaded I downloaded something from an old clip of Marco Rubio talking about, how the unipolar world order is over. So I'm going to play that here in a second. But in the meantime, as I pull it up, so what we're seeing right now is Trump's Monroe Doctrine 2.0, which essentially states that the Western Hemisphere belongs to the United States. The first Monroe Doctrine was put in place under United States President Monroe in 1823, I believe. It was almost like 9 years after the War of 1812, or the Second War of Independence, when the British reinvaded. They actually burned the White House down. And almost a decade after that, the French were doing things that the U.S. government didn't like. There was fears that there would be a Spanish-American war, which eventually happened. They fought in the Philippines and stuff like that. They thought that the Spanish would try to take parts of the west of America back. They were worried that Russia would sail across the ocean and make colonies in Alaska. So Monroe basically said, here's the doctrine. The Western Hemisphere, the entire continent is essentially, especially North America, is ours. It is the playground of the United States. Any European involvement in that will be met with military force. And then, of course, the Monroe Doctrine was mainly just focused towards European countries, not necessarily even Mexico, but like Spain. But this Monroe Doctrine 2.0 that the Trump administration officials and cabinet nominees have been talking about is not about Europe. It's about China. So, real quick, let's talk about that. And again, sorry, I thought I had prepped this video, so you're gonna have to bear with me 1 second. But this is Marco Rubio again, saying something from last year about the unipolar, multipolar world order, and it's actually kind of reasonable.
World to simply have a unipolar power. That was an anomaly. It was the product of the end of the Cold War. But eventually you were going to reach back to a point where you had a multipolar world, great powers in different parts of the planet. We face that now with China and to some extent, Russia. And then you have rogue states like Iran and North Korea you have to deal with. So now more than ever, we need to remember that foreign policy should always be about furthering the national interest of the United States, and doing so to the extent possible, avoiding war and armed conflict, which we have seen 2 times in the last century be very costly. They're celebrating the 80th anniversary this year of the end of the Second World War. That I think if you look at the scale and scope of destruction and loss of life that occurred, it would be far worse if we had a global conflict now and life on the planet.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to parse through like what some of these guys actually believe, but it is reasonable saying that a unipolar world order is unnatural and it's obviously not sustainable. And we see that in the Trump administration's policies, as confused as they are. So we're going to place massive tariffs on China, walks it back to 10%. We're gonna have to bomb Iran and deal with its nuclear program. Silent, completely silent on all of that. And what I said like last year, if he got reelected, this kind of this global imperialism, because it's not sustainable, would be redirected back into our neck of the woods and the imperial core itself. Also, I don't trust Marco Rubio. That's him sounding very reasonable. We know that he is kind of like a war hawk and a neocon. That's his voting record. That's his legislation record. So again, the annoying thing about the Trump administration is you literally can't trust what any of these dudes said. But if he said like the unipolar world order is not sustainable, and then I see U.S. foreign policy, which has generally been directed towards the Middle East over the past 20 years with the global war on terror and the Sahel, North Africa, East Africa, and Somalia, Yemen, it's coming back to the Western Hemisphere. Like all these executive orders with Greenland, the stupid beef with Canada, the stuff over the Panama Canal, engaging with Colombia and Venezuela. It seems like the U.S. is kind of staying here. And that's interesting because, it's basically where our power lies. It's where we can still bully countries literally into compliance. So, and that's kind of like the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of the end of the death. So on Saturday, basically President Trump made good on his promise to impose steep tariffs on America's 3 largest trading partners, Canada, China, and Mexico, citing national emergency on the flow of fentanyl and undocumented immigrants into the United States. But really doubling down on the fentanyl narrative, growing all that fentanyl on all those fentanyl trees up in the boreal forest in Canada. We see you. Enjoy not having access to Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. So the action, which was expected to take effect on Tuesday, includes a 25% duty on all imports from Mexico and most from Canada, and additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods imported into the U.S. So Trump has raised and promised to employ tariffs for three primary purposes, right? These are the three primary purposes of why Trump does the tariff rhetoric. Apparently to raise revenue, not going to work. To bring trade into balance and to bring rival countries to the negotiating table. That's the only, the third one is the only option. So in our neck of the woods, sanctions and tariffs can still work in a way that they didn't work on Russia or they didn't work on Iran. But all these countries are of incredibly close proximity to U.S. power. Yeah, and of course, it's a fundamentally stupid idea, which is why he will always back down from it and take a deal. He bullies smaller people into a deal because he's a bully, and then he takes a better deal, tells his followers, his cultists that, yeah, we did this, and then they're happy, you know. But economists fundamentally warn that these moves negatively impact American businesses. Like, even when he says something and he backs down, like, the market still crashed. American businesses and consumers, prices still go up, many of whom are still reeling from the sharp rise of inflation in recent years. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned Saturday that tariffs won't solve the years-long issues at the borders and instead threaten to, quote, upend supply chains. Even the threat of a tariff upends supply chains and lays people off and raise prices for American families. So consumers are clearly going to be worse off, says Sung Won Son, professor of finance and economics at the Loyola Marymount University and chief economist at SS Economics. So this was from a CNN interview on Saturday. About 1/3 of U.S. imports come from the three countries Trump targeted on Saturday. Their products are among some of the most commonplace and critical items used by Americans, including fruits, vegetables, meats, eggs, gas, automobile, electronics, clothing, lumber, beer, and spirits. The last one's the most important point. And one of the things that, of all the literature I've read about this, one thing that nobody wanted to talk about was who's the second largest importer of civil aircraft parts to the United States, to airlines and to contractors like Boeing and Airbus, which is based out of Europe, but they have production facilities here in America. Obviously, Airbus does. All the major airlines fly Airbus mostly. Who's like the biggest? What's 50% of our aircraft maintenance parts coming from? It's coming from Canada. So tariffs seem great. And the only exception that Trump placed on the tariffs to Canada, and of course, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not. The only exemption was oil and gas, not aircraft parts. And with all the crazy shit that's been going on with that should have arguably been an exception as well. So, yeah, if the tariffs actually went through, grocery prices would have gone up. I was about to go stock up on tomatoes and avocados tonight because I'm in Texas and Mexico. Mexican produce is like our biggest import. So, in the end, all this craziness, and we're going to get more into it, is making our neighbors hate us and pushing them closer to China, who's also being tariffed for no good reason. So, they might have to come to the deal and they can't boycott the U.S. right now, but this has long-term political and diplomatic ramifications. So when we say the empire is in decline, it still has a lot of power behind it, but people are getting sick of this, and all the U.S. now has is hard power. What does Trump do when BRICS try to de-dollarize? He says, hey, BRICS, we're going to tariff every country in BRICS, which is insane. But literally the U.S. economy would die. But the only thing that is a hollow threat coming from hard power. We have lost the ability to co-opt rather than to coerce. And we can't really coerce that well anyways. We can coerce Mexico, our biggest trading partner, Canada, Colombia, and maybe Greenland. But that's great. Awesome. So someone in the comments said we should all just leave the USA behind and join BRICS. Yeah, but anyways, just to demonstrate how like not popular we're getting everywhere, here is fans at a Toronto's Raptors game in Ottawa, Canada, booing the Star Spangled Banner, which is sung, if you're not American, at the beginning of sports games when an American team plays. Yeah, that was kind of satisfying just to see that. Yeah, but America, right? So real quick, just to kind of drive home what people are like saying about, Trump like beating down Canada and beating down Mexico and beating down Colombia. I just want you to look at this really weird tweet that Elon Musk put out. Like the simulation is broken. And here, I just wrote, Elon Musk wants to personally, quote, work the chisel. We're not even a month into this. Look, the decline of empire is really weird. It's weirder than I thought. He said, I don't know if you know the infamous fascist account End Wokeness. They posted 2 weeks in, Mexico caved, Panama caved, Colombia caved. And then Elon Musk made a quote tweet, and he said, at this rate of achievement, not only should President at real Donald Trump be on Mount Rushmore, I want to personally work the chisel. Yeah. Okay. Just gonna put that there, leave that there for posterity, and move on. Yeah, someone says chisel my nizzle. Okay, and I just want to play President Claudia Sheinbaum, President of Mexico, her response to all of this. Of course, the tariff on Mexico has been delayed a month until they can hash out the finer details, and we'll go into what the agreement has been so far. But this is overdubbed. She obviously made this in Spanish, but for the sake of our audio listeners, there's an AI-driven overdub, and I'm told it's correct.
As you are probably aware, yesterday the United States government imposed 25% tariffs on the products we export to their country. Look, we have gone 30 years without this happening because we have a free trade agreement. The last free trade agreement was signed by President López Obrador with President Trump himself. This measure of 25% tariffs has effects on both countries, but it has very serious effects on the economy of the United States, as it will raise the cost significantly of all the products exported from Mexico to the United States. They will have 25% more cost. In accordance with these measures approved by the United States government, there are documents supporting it. And according to this, one of the reasons for imposing this tariff is due to the fentanyl entering from Mexico into the United States, which causes illness and overdose deaths. But even more irresponsible, terribly irresponsible, is that the White House issues a document saying there are links between the government of Mexico and organized crime. I want to talk to you about the statement I posted on my social media.
Yes, the cartel does buy off government officials, both in Mexico and the United States. So again, hypocrisy is the foundational base rock of U.S. foreign policy.
Yesterday, there I explain who truly has ties with these criminal groups, the reason for the overdose deaths of Americans. And I also say that if they want to take action, they should not set their sights on Mexico, but on their own country.
Yeah, we create the supply here in America. Reagan's war on drugs was completely ineffective.
Where they have done nothing to stop the illegal sale of this and other drugs. First of all...
Actually, the highest the highest rate of incarceration, like 43% of all prison sentences come from drug-related arrests. And the recidivism rate and the recapture rate for people who go into prison on drug-related offenses is insanely high. So we also need a prison labor force, and drugs make a lot of people a lot of money in the prison industrial complex as well.
As I said yesterday, we categorically reject the slander made by the White House against the government of Mexico of having alliances with criminal organizations, as well as any interference intentions in our territories. Sovereignty is not negotiable. If there is such an alliance anywhere, it is in the gun shops in the United States.
Yeah, most of the cartels get most of the cartels' weaponry, especially their advanced weaponry, is smuggled into Mexico from the United States by U.S. citizens. Also, a ton of the fentanyl smuggled into the United States is done by American citizens.
Which sell high-powered weapons, yes, high-powered, that are exclusively for military use to these criminal groups. This was demonstrated, pay close attention, it was demonstrated by the United States Department of Justice on January 8th of this year. Here, I have the document that was published on that date from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, which is under the Department of Justice. Take note. It acknowledged that 74% of the weapons used by organized crime in Mexico come illegally from the military industry.
Look, anyways, the bottom line is, again, in translation, some things get lost. There was a concessions from Trump as well to delay this. And one of those was that the United States would invest in combating weapons trafficking coming from the United States into Mexico. So yes, Mexico will send more border troops to border security and stuff, but yeah, the whole fentanyl thing is just a narrative to manufacture consent for blanket tariffs and crack down on border security, both to the South and the North, and to increase the national security and police state in the United States. Fentanyl is scary. It's been popularized by propaganda shows like Law and Order SVU and stuff like that to be like this scary boogeyman, which it is. A lot of people die from it. But yeah, it's not coming from China. And if it is, it's a tiny percent. So, yeah, so Ms. Scheinbaum said during a news conference in Mexico City that she had reached agreement with Donald Trump after a very respectful conversation. Under the deal, Mexico received a 1-month delay and a promise from the United States to help staunch the movements of guns back over the border. Yeah, so basically Trump's bootlicker account said, Mexico crushed, Colombia crushed. It's like, no, Mexico gave Trump an off-ramp to not do a mutually destructive trade war. So he can go back to his followers and say, we crushed them. And then when it comes to Canada, a senior Canada government official familiar with the call between, this is New York Times reporting, Trump and Trudeau this morning was not too optimistic of the possibility that Canada would be able to get a similar reprieve. Yeah, so the focus on fentanyl, so like automakers are relieved in the United States. Europe may be next. He's planning, he said he's going to try and sanction the EU because they've been so terrible to us. But this frenzy of last-minute maneuvering demonstrated by Mr. Trump's willingness to use tariffs as a source of leverage against America's most important trading partners. There's a flurry of last-minute stuff, but everything is going to be stable for now. Now that the tariff leveraging has worked, he'll probably use it more and more, even though he can't with Europe, can't with BRICS. So, yeah, he may have gotten a PR victory out of this, but he is pissed off and alienated so many people. And China, he's now, with the closure of USAID, put China in a position to become the leader in global soft power. We're kind of hated right now, if you haven't noticed. So when everybody hates the empire, that's not good for the empire, right? So someone just said an hour ago, yeah. As we started this the show, Canada also got a 1-month reprieve. Someone in the comments is really updating me. Thanks so much. U.S. can share joint defense industrial base for 1/2 of all Lockheed Martin tail fins. Yeah, because they're made by Magellan and Winnipeg. Of course, I noted earlier that Canada is one of our biggest defense trading partners and provides a ton of aviation maintenance parts to the United States civil aviation industry. It's going to be quite a ride for the next 4 years. And I definitely believe that the capitalist class, the billionaire oligarchs and their colleagues, their Fortune 500 colleagues in the Democratic Party elite are going to try and make as much money as possible before this whole thing burns down. But hey, we're all in it together. It's going to get worse before it gets worse. So, okay. We are going to do some questions, live Q&A here at the end. Someone said, yeah, Bullet the Bunny says 4 years. Muhahaha. Yeah, I'll be happy if it's 10. Yeah, Democrats aren't going to save you, and there's no real viable other option. So it'll be nice if it's 10. So let's get organized and start hardening ourselves for the insanity. Also, to not be affected so much by the insanity that's going to come from this administration. As you can see, like, he makes these sweeping claims and always backs down. He's a bully. He gets what he can and he walks away. That's his art of the deal, which he had ghost written back in the 80s. All right, here we go. All right. What would you say the critics of USAID as a decades-long front to launder money to destabilize governments all over the world and its defunding may have a net positive effect? I think in the end, I'm not familiar with anything that the USAID has necessarily done to destabilize governments beyond fund potentially candidates that are friendly to the U.S. I'm not really certain how a part of the coup manufacturing apparatus it is, but it is used to leverage in an imperial way foreign policy objectives against smaller, desperate, poorer governments. So it is a tool of empire. It going away will be very painful for a lot of people. I'm not sure if it will be a net positive effect. The U.S. is losing, or at least halting for the next 90 days, for the most part, Israel and Egypt being an exception, foreign aid that a lot of people rely on to survive, not just with medical aid, but also through, mine sweeping that's happening in Vietnam after the Vietnam War. It's global in its repercussions for a lot of people, but the U.S. is losing potentially one of its imperial tools, or at the very least, it is being retransformed into something that exclusively only serves U.S. foreign policy objectives under the Trump administration. I personally think we'll see if I'm right in 90 days. But my instinct and my intuition is at this moment that the Trump administration and Elon Musk is trying to get USAID on board stacked with loyalists, people who are on message, and then Marco Rubio will exert more control over it for his position as, Secretary of State. Someone's like, oh no, not the precious USAID. What will we do with our beloved fake aid arm of the CIA? I don't think it's going anywhere necessarily. It may be transformed into something else, but we're not going to stop. The U.S. is not going to stop leveraging aid. Are you kidding me? Elon doesn't even know. Okay, so I think someone's saying Elon doesn't even know what dialectic materialism means. Yeah, dude, Elon doesn't know what Marxism is. I'm not necessarily a Marxist, but I've read all the stuff. Like, I pretty much potatoes. But yeah, he got on with Alice Weidel of the far right, essentially neo-Nazi German Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD party, who Elon Musk says is the only hope for the German people, and said that the Nazis were communists. Either he's intentionally lying and using his platform to like brainwash people to think that only atrocities can be committed by communist governments. Therefore, we need to like be all anarcho-capitalists and union bust and pay the billionaires all the money, or he generally doesn't know that, you know, the communists, even before the Slavs or the Roma or the Jews were put into concentration camps, it was socialists and communists and anarchists. So, and union leaders as well. They were the first to die in the camps. So, I think I don't know what he's like. Yeah. So he probably doesn't even know. But to go back to your point, he probably doesn't know what dialectic materialism is at all. Okay. What is lost? Yeah, I guess this was a response to the fentanyl crisis. What isn't lost in translation is the consumers of the drugs. Who consumes them? I'm not sure if you're talking about fentanyl or the USAID, like medical aid packages to countries in the global south. The drug problem in America wouldn't really exist without the material conditions of the American experience being so abysmal. You know, if people were less hopeless and had more of a future and weren't just put in prison, there wouldn't be as much of a drug problem, ergo a fentanyl problem, ergo a cartel problem, ergo an immigrant problem. But you know, hey, late stage capitalism, let's go, people. I heard Mexico is the #1 producer of 50 cal ammo. Is that only commercial? I can't imagine the U.S. military contracts from Mexico. Well, we do have a lot of factories in Mexico. They're run by American companies, but they employ Mexican labor, and they're run out of Mexico. I know that major car industries have factories in Mexico. I personally have never heard of 50 cal ammo being manufactured there. Wouldn't surprise me. We outsource literally everything. Okay, so Bernie approved Rubio. This is why, okay, so during Marco Rubio's Senate confirmation hearing, he got 99 votes for him, 0 against, I believe. And y'all can fact check me in the comments. I read that article. I did a speed read of that. Yeah, a lot of people were disappointed that Bernie voted to confirm Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. And this is why I say that the Democratic Party is done. They're literally done. They have no juice left. So like Bernie Sanders, like one of the most progressive candidates, can't even vote against a war hawk. He can't vote against a war hawk because he's voting against other people. So he can't just vote against every Republican nominee because that's politically bad, I guess. So he just had to be like, pick his battles along with other senators and be like, fuck it. All these other Democratic senators were like, fuck it, there's nothing we can do. Let's just try to get the worst ones, stop them from getting nominated. And that's their strategy. Their strategy is triage, like putting on a tourniquet. They have no cohesive strategy. They're just trying to survive right now. And I don't think they'll ever be able to pick themselves back up. Will you interview that ex-general again? Oh, yeah, Major General Dennis Leitch. I remember he said he didn't think Hegseth would get into power, yet he did. So it'd be very interesting to hear his thoughts about that. You guys have to realize how close it came to Hegseth not getting nominated. The vice president had to come in and do a tiebreaker. I think it's just a testament to, institute. I don't know, like if I grew up in a different time, and I hadn't experienced what I experienced, I would have more faith in our civil and federal institutions. I basically just assume the worst right now. So yeah, he's definitely going to come back on. We're going to talk about a few things here in the next couple months for sure. None of this is unlikely to positively affect the price of eggs, healthcare, or housing. Hard to be a great country without these issues being addressed, and they won't be. Yeah, they won't be. So I guess I would like to say I don't think that it's going to be as insane or continue like at this insane of a momentum in terms of policy being enacted. I definitely think we're seeing a soft, slow moving coup happen. But it's not going to be straight like jackboots busting down your door, and unless you're no, it's probably going to be really bad really quick. So we're going to do an episode on this, probably on Colonial Outcasts, about what we can do right now. But yeah, I think we're out of time, and it's beyond the purview of this. Do I think the U.S. will attack Iran? I'll just end out with this. No. The theme of this episode is we are a declining empire. We can no longer power project to Iran, and we don't have public consent for another imperial war in West or Central Asia. So we're turning in to Latin America, to North America, and onto our own people. So that's what the Trump administration is going to be about. Monroe Doctrine 2.0. And you are living on the downturn. Parents, we're on the upturn. We're on the steep downturn. So it's going to, at least it won't be boring, I guess. So appreciate you guys for watching. Hope to see you next Monday when we do the post-weekend post-mortem. I'm sure it'll be something else and something equally ridiculous. So let me say something corny, like stay frosty out there. And yeah, see you next week. And thank you so much for watching.